America's relationship with the automobile has been one of, if not the most influential in all of the car industry, creating some of the most iconic vehicles of all time. As enthusiasts, when we think of American car icons, several names come to mind. Muscle and pony cars like the Mustangs, Firebirds, Chargers, and GTOs. Elegant luxury land yachts like the Cadillacs and Lincolns of the 60s and 70s. And, of course, our modern showings like the Viper, Venom, and Ford GT. But if you're like me, you've most certainly noticed one glaring omission. A car whose history, heritage, and performance on and off the racetrack has made it easily the most iconic and greatest vehicle ever produced in these 50 states. The car literally dubbed America's sports car
is the Chevrolet Corvette.
Now, it's most likely that you're already familiar with the history of the Corvette, but let's go over the spark notes, just in case you need a refresher. Post-war 1950s. American GIs who fought in World War II are finally home and have money. A couple of years in Europe being exposed to small sporty coupes and roadsters meant young Americans were hungry, but the big three of Ford, GM, and Chrysler had no food to give them. Enter Harley Earl, GM's legendary designer, who gave birth to a new kind of American machine, the Corvette. The recipe was simple: fiberglass body, new sleek jet-age styling, and only 2 seats. Unfortunately, this C1 first attempt left a bad taste in the mouth of many. A 6-cylinder engine and a 2-speed automatic proved to be 2 mistakes in the ingredients list. But it was clear, this new dish was here to stay. Once the small block V8 was finally added, things really started to come together. Those working on the new GM Coupe knew that there was one thing they had to focus on: racing. And the chef that helped perfect this dish? One man named Zora Arkus-Duntov. Duntov was exposed to the Corvette in 1953. Loving the looks but disliking the taste, Duntov knew the Vetta needed a little bit more spice. Enter the second generation, or C2. The C2 launched in 1963, and immediately the difference between the C1 and C2 was clear. Power? Plenty. 327 cubic inches pushed out various numbers of horsepower, the most being 360. Handling? Improved. More refined suspension made the C2 one of only a few choices for track day goers. Styling? Turned up to 11. Many Corvette fans believe the C2 to be the best-looking Corvette, and it certainly makes sense why. This generation of Corvette also introduced 2 packages which were completely racing-oriented. The first, Z06, bigger springs and struts, stiffer ride, larger anti-roll bars, and a larger fuel tank? Yes, the original Z06 touted a larger fuel tank, 36.5 gallons compared to the standard 20-gallon tank. Its purpose was to aid when racing at large tracks, as a bigger tank means less stops for fuel. That's something you'd never see advertised in a modern car. The second special package was the Grand Sport, or GS. This was what race spec looked like in the 60s. Lighter body panels, aluminum block V8, side pipes, and much more. The reason for these modifications was to compete with another icon from this era, one similar to the Corvette with a V8, small body, big engine. That car being the Shelby Cobra. Later model years of the C2 introduced a big block V8, one of which being the L88. A 427 cubic inch monster, the L88 true power numbers are highly debated, but most agree that the number sits somewhere between 425 and 450 horsepower, and similar numbers for torque. The L88 was also one of the engine options on the next generation of the Corvette, the C3. This is the longest generation of Corvette, lasting from 1967 to 1982. It also was a bit of a roller coaster. The Corvette was unfortunately not safe from the gas crisis of the 70s, which had a detrimental effect on the whole automobile industry, but especially hurt America. Famous for its large V8 engines and even larger cars, fuel economy and emissions concerns was the worst thing for these types of vehicles. Fortunately for the Corvette, it did not lose the 8 cylinders under the hood, but the power they could output was significantly reduced. The 68 and 69 model retained the performance and power of the previous generation and even improved on it in some cases. However, entering the 70s, performance started to drop. For 70 and 71, it maintained performance, but starting in 72, the drop became more significant. Now, it must be mentioned that SAE measurements for horsepower had changed during this time, so some numbers may seem much smaller than they actually are. However, into the mid-70s, it was clear that the gas crisis and emissions regulations started to have a significant impact on performance. As an example, in 1973, the base L48 engine produced only 190 horsepower. This is a significant drop from the low 300s of the previous generation. This eventually bottomed out at a measly 165 horsepower in 1975. But thankfully, after this year, performance and horsepower numbers started to climb back up, albeit slowly. While performance certainly took a dip, the styling of the Corvette remained fairly strong. The body lines became a lot more curvy around the fenders and led to a much lower and longer front end. This made the car stand out even more on the road compared to the other American cars of this time period, many of which were still extremely large and boxy. This generation also introduced the first ZR1 package, although it was very minor compared to the later Corvettes with this package. Unfortunately, this model also took away the Stingray badge from the Corvette, which did not return until the C7 generation in 2014. Stopping for a moment, let's discuss the racing performance of these Corvettes more in depth. The C1 and C2 had some of the most promising racing performance. Both cars were extremely popular choices during their day, and proved to be quite capable of maintaining and even surpassing the performance of much more expensive and purpose-built cars. Examples of these would be the Shelby Cobra, as previously mentioned, as well as the Porsches, Ferraris, and Jaguars from Europe, which were well known for their performance and extremely high cost. However, for the common man, the Corvette was the only affordable option and proved to hold its own. The C3 also had good racing heritage, although it certainly died off during the 70s thanks to the previously mentioned issues and regulations.
Maximum lateral acceleration, a test of a car's ability to hold the road in cornering. Only one of these cars can hold the road at 0.91 Gs. It isn't Porsche 928S. It isn't Ferrari 308 GTSI. It isn't Lotus Esprit Turbo. The only one that can hold the road at 0.91 Gs is the Chevrolet Corvette. That's what it takes to be a new world-class champion. Drive today's Chevy. Live today's Chevy.
In case it wasn't obvious from that commercial, the new Corvette wasn't just a refresh of an old idea. It was America's first serious shot at taking on Europe's best. Introduced in 1984, the C4 was that answer. A radical departure from the past in design, ideals, and goals, the C4 would set the groundwork for what a Corvette badge meant and how Corvettes would be designed going forward. Some of these major design differences include independent suspension, a rigid uniframe, and wind tunnel-tested aerodynamics. Styling also got a huge revamp, with the C4 losing the curves of the C3 in favor of a more rigid and squared-off style. It started off strong in 1985, with the C4 dominating SCCA showroom stock, racing from 1985-1987. So much so that the SCCA ended up banning the Corvette from racing. This led Chevrolet to partner with the SCCA to create the all-new Corvette Challenge, a spec series of identical C4 race cars. In terms of the road cars, the 1984 started off pretty bleak power-wise, as the Crossfire-injected L83 V8 only pushed out 205 horsepower. Starting in 1985, the engine changed to the L98, outputting around 250 horsepower. These cars are often referred to as the C4.1, primarily due to the differences between these earlier cars and the later models. One of these differences is the transmissions. The C4.1 had the Doug Nash 4+3 transmission, which was designed to help save fuel. It did this by allowing the driver to engage overdrive in second, third, and fourth gear. A good idea on paper, but not ideal in execution. The C4.2 introduced the ZF 6-speed manual, a fantastic gearbox with good gear ratios. These later models also got the LT series of engines. The LT1 with 300 horsepower and 340 pound-feet of torque, and the LT4, exclusive to the 1996 and Grand Sport models, with 330 horsepower and 340 pound-feet of torque. The final LT engine was the LT5, exclusive to the King of the Hill, the ZR1. The ZR1 was designed to be the ultimate C4. Launched in 1990, the ZR1 was built around a handcrafted 5.7-liter LT5 V8 developed in collaboration with Lotus. This V8 was a huge leap forward in terms of design, boasting 32 valves, 4 camshafts, 16 intake runners, and 16 fuel injectors. All of this while still having the same size and displacement as its L98 base. Oh, did I mention it was an aluminum block? Yes, that means better weight distribution as well. All of this work by GM and Lotus enabled the ZR1 to deliver 375 horses and do it smoothly. Later in 1993, they worked to push even more out of it, outputting 405 horsepower. The Corvette had not seen numbers like that since the late 60s. To assemble these jewel-like engines, GM even contracted Mercury Marine to hand-build each LT5 by the dozen every day. That extreme engineering translated to extreme performance. The 1990 ZR1 could sprint 0 to 60 in the mid-4-second range and topped out well past 170 miles per hour. In March 1990, a production ZR1 proved its mettle by smashing endurance records, averaging over 175 miles per hour for 24 straight hours. This car single-handedly ended the debate and made the Corvette well and truly a supercar. While Chevy was busy designing the ZR1 to become a record breaker, another name was quietly rewriting the Corvette's performance rulebook: Callaway. Reeves Callaway, a former race driver turned engineer, convinced GM to let his company develop a factory-option twin-turbo Corvette. The result? The legendary Callaway B2K, available directly through Chevrolet dealers from 1987 to 1991. With forged internals, upgraded cooling, and twin Turbonetics turbochargers, the Callaway Corvette pumped out 345 horsepower, way ahead of the base car, and by 1991, it was up to 403 horses, rivaling the ZR1, but with brutal turbo torque. Enter the Sledgehammer, a heavily modified C4 with a fully built twin-turbo 5.7-liter V8, street legal, air conditioning still intact, and in 1988, it set a record, 254.76 miles per hour at the Ohio Transportation Research Center. That made it the fastest street-legal car in the world. Yes, faster than anything from Ferrari, Porsche, or even Bugatti at the time. These cars are unmistakable compared to the regular Corvettes, with wild body kits and aerodynamic touches. Today, the B2K and Sledgehammer are prized icons of the turbocharged Corvette underground, factory-backed, track-proven, and absolutely unforgettable. The next generation would take everything that GM designers had learned through the production years of the C4 and make major improvements for the fifth-generation Corvette, the C5. The first major change was to the frame. Now, using a hydroformed box frame, the C5 was more rigid and durable than the C4, while maintaining the same weight. Next came the transmission, or what would now be the transaxle. Yes, the C5 Corvette made the change to a transaxle, allowing for a perfect 50-50 weight distribution with the transmission mounted in the rear of the car. A torque tube joined the transmission to the new and improved Chevy small block, and the first splash that would become a cascading wave of reliable power for muscle car lovers and tuners alike, the mighty LS1. Design-wise, the C5 kept the base design from the C4, but smoothed out and curved many of the body lines to bring it up to date with similar cars from the era. Most notable of these being the Mazda RX-7, which the C5 shows a remarkable similarity to. Power for the C5 had improved on the base C4 Corvette's power, with the LS1 pushing out 345 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. This somewhat lackluster power, as compared to the C4 Grand Sport and ZR1, as well as the plastic fantastic interior, led many die-hard Corvette fans to be unsatisfied with the C5, even if the handling, transmission, and engine were all outstanding. However, starting in 2001, GM brought back the Z06 package, giving the C5 the power output it needed. The LS1 was beefed up to make more power and given the designation LS6. 405 horsepower and 401 pound-feet of torque were the new power numbers, and the hatchback was removed to install the fixed roof for more rigidity. With it going 0 to 60 in 4 seconds flat, the C5 was one of the best performance cars of the era, and available at a reasonable price. The classic Corvette recipe had officially returned. And of course, the C5 followed in the footsteps of its ancestors and went racing, this time as a heavily modified track car, the C5R. Built by Pratt & Miller and backed by GM, the C5R was built to be an endurance racer, and a successful one at that. It won its class at Le Mans 3 years in a row. This kicked off the Corvette racing team, which continued to drive Corvette racers up to and including the most recent Corvette, the C8. If you're enjoying the video, please like and subscribe. This is the first video on my channel, so please comment below on which car or car story you'd like to see covered. The sales and racing successes of the C5 would be improved upon and enhanced through the next generation Corvette, the C6. The C6 was introduced in 2005, and with it the next generation LS, the LS2. Base power was now up to 400 horses, and the 0 to 60 time was 4 seconds. This meant the base model Corvette in 2005 matched the top-of-the-line Corvette from just 1 year prior. This, of course, was not the only improvement. The body was lighter and a few inches shorter. Pop-up headlights, which had been featured on the Corvette since the introduction of the C2, were removed for fixed headlights for better aerodynamics and better stability overall. The Z06 also made a return, but was even more impressive for the C6. Under the hood was a 7-liter LS7, a hand-built dry-sump V8 outputting 505 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. Engine displacement and performance had not been seen in a Corvette since the late 60s C2 cars. Needless to say, if it hadn't returned already, America's sports car was back. The C6 Z06 was one of the best performance car bargains of all time, and remains that way to this day. Average prices in 2025 sit anywhere between $35,000 and $45,000. Certainly hard to beat for 500 horses and a 0 to 60 time less than 4 seconds. While the Z06 was certainly impressive, it wasn't the only package to return on the C6. While it may have been skipped for the C5, many believe it was worth the wait. 6.2 liters of a supercharged LS V8 outputting an eye-watering 638 horsepower, the King of the Hill had returned as the C6 ZR1. Completely overhauled, the Corvette had returned to supercar status. It had a carbon fiber roof and hood for lower weight and center of gravity, wider body to fit 335mm tires in the rear, and upgraded suspension, brakes, and wheels to handle all that power. In addition to the ZR1, the C6 also got the Corvette racing treatment with the C6R. The C6R, like its predecessor, won several races in its class, proving to the world that the Corvette was here to stay. The C6 had dominated both on and off the track, and GM designers knew that the power and price tag needed to be supported by other areas of the car. Most high-end sports car owners held minimum standards their cars needed to meet, such as luxury interiors and modern user interfaces, striking lines that matched the power output and carbon fiber everywhere. All of these were missing on the C6, with its plasticine interior, standard GM audio and interface equipment, and curvy body lines that had been inspired by the C5's design, which originated in the mid-90s. So what did GM do to remedy this? Well, the answer to this problem is C7. Interiors were now closer to a Cadillac than a Cobalt, and held modern tech like a customizable gauge cluster and better heads-up display. The C7 also came with magnetic ride control for the suspension, something that sounds more at home on a six-figure Mercedes-Benz than a Chevy built in Kentucky. The C7 wasn't just new, however, it brought back some of the old too. The Stingray badge finally made a return, and the engine under the hood? The LT1. The math for this adds up too. C3 was the last time we had seen the Stingray badge, and the C4 was the first and last time we saw the LT engines, so C3 plus C4 gets you C7. Though the name was the same, this LT1 was very different from the original. 6.2 liters and 455 horsepower allowed the new Corvette to rocket from 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds. Also returning for the C7 was the Z06, now essentially a street-legal race car with 650 horsepower from another returning engine code, the LT4. All that power cut the 0 to 60 time down to under 3 seconds. That's officially supercar territory from the Z06, and it was the most optional Z06 yet, as it could come as a coupe, convertible, automatic, or manual. However, the Z06 wasn't the only package returning again, as the ZR1 was back and looking way different. One thing I didn't mention when discussing the C4 ZR1 and C6 ZR1 was their looks. The main reason for this was that not much changed. On the C4, the only noticeable change was to the size of the tires, a slightly wider body, and badging. The C6 got some more noticeable changes like the glass hood window, wider body and tires, and some changes to the body lines. For the C7, however, the difference was night and day. The front bumper was completely altered to fit carbon fiber aero pieces, leading to the large vents in the hood, not to mention the airplane wing-sized spoiler in the back. The final callback was the LT5, again present in a ZR1, but now outputting over 750 horsepower, a number most people could only dream of. All of that power and aerodynamics allowed this Corvette to reach 212 miles per hour. Supercar stuff. That brings us to today, where the C8 is the modern Corvette. Mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, it adopted the layout used by supercars for decades. The looks had to change drastically to adapt to the new layout. Obviously, the front end got smaller and the rear end larger, and the body lines made more sharp to accommodate. As for the engine, the LT2 was here and made 495 horses. Still using the pushrod design, the V8 remained even when the body had changed significantly. The exterior wasn't the only change. The interior feels like a cockpit. Completely driver-oriented, the C8 understands its audience. The only thing missing is the manual transmission. Not available on the C8, but with a dual-clutch transmission, it shifted faster than any human ever could. No manual certainly hurt some purists, but this car isn't about nostalgia. It is about performance. In 2023, Chevy dropped the C8 Z06 with a 5.5-liter flat-plane crank V8 screaming to 8,600 RPM. It's the most exotic engine ever fitted to a Corvette. Naturally aspirated, 670 horsepower, track-borne fury, and newly announced and soon to be released, the ZR1 with its LT7 makes over 1,000 horsepower. If only Mr. Duntov could see what his baby would become. The C8 Corvette didn't just change the car, it changed the conversation. It proved that Corvette could evolve, compete, and still stay true to its roots. The V8's still here, the soul's still here. Only now, it lives behind your head. And this is where the story pauses, not ends. The Corvette is absolutely the most iconic car to come from the United States. From its performance on track to its sales success in the showroom, the Corvette has proved to be a legend, and has and will continue to be the dream cars of many, while providing those lucky enough to own one a driving experience like no other. If you like this video, please subscribe, and let me know what car story you'd like to see covered in the comments below.